Welcome back to the M&M Discipleship Podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a disciple of Christ. We aim to look for God in our daily lives, be in His Word, and strive out to live the teachings of Jesus. My name is Dakota Moody, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Michael Round. Michael, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. We had some severe storms last week, and everybody's kind of recovering from that. But other than that, good weekend, good things going on. The question of the hour, how was Charleston?
So he told you all, if you were all listening last week, he told you to mark it down because he said Dakota's a contrarian. So he's going to say he hated it just because Michael said he liked it. And I did not hate it. It was not bad at all. In fact, it was quite a pleasant city. I understand why people like it so much. I really do. It was a little rainy while we were there, but we still had a very enjoyable experience. Went to the beach in the Isle of Palms, did a lot of stuff downtown, took tours, walked the battlements out there, went on Rainbow Row, went to the parks and everything. Very nice experience. Went to some good restaurants, had some good food, got to see everything. And it was nice. I wouldn't say we actually saw everything. We didn't get to do everything that we maybe would want to do in Charleston, which leaves me with a good taste in my mouth because it makes me want to go back again, because if I did too much, then I would probably be too tired and I wouldn't want to go back.
That's the thing. It's not a place you can see in one weekend. And I think that's part of the charm of it is people do want to go back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I would say that for sure. I thought it was very good. Now, you claimed that it was the best city in America. I don't know about that. I would probably pull back just a little bit.
Well, now I did send you references. I send you multiple articles.
You sent me a bunch of articles by like Southern Living about being this is the best small town in the Southeast. It's like, okay, well, fine enough, but like best town in America.
There was a particular there's a particular publication that rated them, and they've won it 11 years in a row. Let's see. That's it. Travel and Leisure.
Said what, best small town in America?
No, favorite cities in the U.S. category for the 11th year in a row.
In it was the favorite?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and again, more travel oriented, I could see where, be a little bit different about if you think about a place to live, maybe.
I'll say that for sure. I'll say that for
traffic
sure.
is rough in Charleston.
Never, ever live there. I'll say that for sure. Just a mediamente. Like I would not do that in any way, shape, or form. It was a very nice place to visit. I would visit again. My biggest issue with visiting, though, frankly, was not Charleston itself. It was the fact that you had to get there. Many of you who are listening are from the state of South Carolina. I'm not hating on you. I'm hating on your driving because this is the worst state in the union to drive a car. I do not care what anyone says. I've been in states, and I define bad drivers very differently than other people. Some people would say dangerous drivers are the worst drivers, which in that case, Texas has the most dangerous drivers for sure. But I don't consider dangerous drivers bad drivers. I consider them dangerous drivers. I consider drivers bad when they can't get out of the left lane. And I don't know what it is about the South Carolina Department of Transportation or whoever, the DMVs down here, do not teach you people how to get out of the left lane. It is not your right to be in the left lane. Okay, You use the left lane like the bathroom. You use it when you need to, then you get out. You don't spend all day there. And people don't understand that in this state. And it makes me very mad. Very mad. It really
just a word on that too. Dakota is a very aggressive driver. So when he cannot get in the left lane, it bothers him greatly.
Well, it's not about that. It's not about me getting in the left lane.
You said dangerous drivers. I think it is very dangerous to hang out in the left lane. Because especially when trucks do it, trucks pass trucks and traffic slows down, 10 or 15 miles an hour below the speed limit. Then that can get dangerous.
It's causing all this traffic to back up, and that's exactly what happened. Like, I'll say this: it took us 5.5 hours to get down to Charleston from the upstate of South Carolina. It should never take that long to do that.
That's a 3-hour drive, by the way, people.
Yes, it should be like a 3-hour drive, and it should have been like a 3-hour drive. Now, part of that was this aforementioned storms because
Yeah.
they came through and it caused the road to be a little wet. And there was an 18-wheeler that literally like plowed off the side of the road and like caused part of that. Like an hour of that was that because we had to
Mm.
pretty much completely stop to do that. But other bits of it was just people not knowing how to drive and they're hanging out in the left lane, causing all this traffic to build up continuously. And I will also say this, some of you who are listening may live in Columbia. In my humble opinion, you talk about the best cities in America. I think Columbia is the worst city in America by a large margin. I mean, and I haven't been to like terrible places, really terrible places, but for me, I especially hate driving through your town. If you live in Columbia, I really can't stand driving through your town. It's not as bad as Atlanta, but you're not
Mhm.
anywhere near as big as Atlanta. Okay, so
Right.
it shouldn't be that bad to drive through Columbia, yet every single time it is
Mm.
one of the worst cities in America to drive through. In my
Mm.
experience, and I've driven through cities that have very bad traffic issues. All right, I'm talking about Dallas, I'm talking about Houston, I'm talking about Austin, I'm talking about all these places. Columbia is not big enough to justify how bad the traffic is, but I know why. It's because of the drivers.
Mm. I don't know about that.
I will say,
Well,
I
I
will
will say
say it.
that,
I have lived in
yeah.
many states in this great country. Okay, I've lived in the states that a lot of people think have the worst drivers. People will say Florida has the worst drivers. Florida does not have the
Mm.
worst drivers. Florida has the worst drivers when they're not in Florida. That's the thing. When
Mm.
they're in Florida, it's fine. Whenever you live
Mm.
in Florida, you don't like the out of state plates because they don't know how to drive in Florida, right? When you're in Florida,
Ah.
it's fine. When you're in Texas, yeah, people drive dangerously, blah, 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 blah. And sometimes they don't know how to get out of the left lane, but it's not as bad as in this state. All right. By the way, Arkansas, very underrated bad driving state as well. I mean, it just kind of is, especially a lot of trucks in the left lane, man. It happens all the time.
Mm.
But for my money, hands down, this is the state that is the worst to drive in.
Mm.
And I experienced on the way down and the way back up. But that's a whole different point. Charleston was a very nice city. I enjoyed our time there. It was very nice. But people need to learn how to get out of the left lane. And if you learn anything from this, hopefully you learn how to live your life better for Christ. But number two would be get out of the left lane. That's the
Mm.
things I hope you learn from this podcast.
Well, and North Dakota is a North Carolinian through and through, and so again, his contrarian self, South Carolina cannot do anything right. So
I
there
would
you
disagree with that point a little bit. I'd
go.
say you do it to yourself, people. You do it to yourself.
Well,
For me.
I especially at this point, um, South Carolina is still what I would consider home. Um, it all grows on you. Even Columbia, I didn't have a very high opinion of Columbia, but because you're going to school there and spending more time there, there are some good aspects to Columbia. Obviously, it's got
I
some
like your
bad too.
zoo, Columbia. I like your zoo a lot.
Hey,
I do
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Riverbank Zoo
Well,
for the win. I'll take that
in
any day of the
Columbia's
week.
defense right now, they're going through some dramatic construction with 26, and it backs all the way up like 45 minutes outside of Columbia, all the construction that they're doing. So anyways, but yeah,
They
I'm
weren't
glad you
even doing
enjoyed.
construction though Saturday on Friday. They weren't even doing it. Anyway,
No, I don't
but
know then.
yes. But it was a
I'm
good
glad you
it
had a
was
good
a good trip.
time.
It was a good trip.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad you at least enjoyed it and respected Charleston.
I
Um,
did. I did. It was a nice city. Like I said, I understand why people like it. I still might like Savannah just a tinge more, right?
and that's
But
fair.
but
It's a
but I
beautiful
grew
state
up
too.
I grew up going to Savannah a little bit more, so I liked it. I also like the fact that in Savannah you can take a trolley tour rather
Mm.
than if you're in Charleston, you either got to take a bus, like a van thing, or like a horse-drawn carriage, which I'm sure that's nice, but I like trolleys. Trolleys was nice. I
Mm.
always liked doing the trolleys. So,
Huh.
but it was nice overall.
Yeah. No,
Yes.
it's definitely a good place and a lot of good things to do. Anything else going on with you? I see you're not wearing your Bayern Munich jersey, so everybody
We
can
don't need to
know.
talk about that. We need to talk about the fact that the officials, I would think in my mind that the stealing of games by Real Madrid would have ended when VAR came into play, video assistant
That's video
replay.
assistant, yeah.
Yeah, video assistant replay in that way where they could actually go back and review. Because by the way, they didn't review stuff in soccer until a couple years ago,
Recently. Yeah.
very recently. Now they can go back and do that, and you would think that that would cause these games to not be handed to Real Madrid on the silver platter by the officials. However, they still do because the guy just refused to even look at the equalizing goal at the end of the game on the video assistant replay. But that's a separate issue. I'm not going to continue to harp on that because it is what it is. We all know soccer is very corrupt. And that continues to be the case even today, which is upsetting, but it is what it is.
Mm, mm. Well,
We need to
since
move. We
you're
need to transition to some more,
yes,
some better things here, some more spiritual things. In doing so, Michael, where have you seen God this week?
I've seen God this week in the opportunities that He has afforded to others, the blessings that He's given to others, and I'm excited for some friends and things that are going on. It's nice to see God work in people's lives, and it's so cool to just get a glimpse of that and see that, because I know that when things change for me, doors open for me, how excited I am, and it's cool to see other people receive that as well. So that's where I've seen God. What about you?
Good. Yeah, as for me, this last weekend we had came back from vacation, obviously a very beautiful vacation, everything I could talk about, where I saw God and the beauty of creation. Every time you go to the ocean, you could definitely see that on display. But really what I would talk about is when we got back, we had a men's golf outing with men from the congregation, and it was one of the most incredible non-spiritual church experiences I ever had, right? Because I mean, it wasn't really spiritually oriented. We're out hitting golf balls. That's really what it's about. But the fellowship that we had with the men who were there, it was something that I have really not felt as an adult in a church before. Just that kind of community fellowship that we had just among the men. And the crazy thing was, and this is where I especially saw God, was I get home from the men's event and I'm glowing because of the fellowship that I had at the event, at the men's event. The women also had an event at the same time. And Anna, my beautiful, wonderful wife, comes home and she's glowing. Why? Because of the wonderful time that she had here at the congregation at the women's event. And we're both just glowing, happy, even though we're in two separate locations and two separate church events because of the kind of fellowship that we had at these events. And,
Mm,
that's where I've really seen God, is the fact that, again, I talked about this a little bit last week, where when you have these connections in Christ, you have infinitely more in common than anything else. And at the men's event, we have men who are in their 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s. Like literally in our group, we had one man in his 50s, one in his 40s, one in his
mm,
30s, one in his 20s. And yet, through all of these spectrums, we had this thing in common, which was Christ. And
mm,
because we had that, such a good time was had. And Anna had the same kind of thing where she's at this ladies event where she's got women from the 70s to their 20s, and she's able to have this connection. Why? Because of this common connection in knowing Christ and being a member of God's family. And that's where I saw God, is in that fellowship and connection that we had.
mm. That's a special thing indeed.
It really
I
is.
was excited to hear about that as well. It's really good when you feel that camaraderie.
Absolutely.
So for this week, we're working through the book of Judges again. We looked at Othniel last week. We're looking at Ehud this week. And remember our cycle of the judges. Yeah, left-handed. The people of Israel, they do evil again. And another nation, this time Moab, led by their king named Eglon, they rise up and oppress Israel. He collects other people. He gathers allies, and they fight against Israel, and they're taking possession. And then, as goes with the cycle, the people of Israel cry out to God, and God raises up a judge. This time it's Ehud, who is described as the son of Gera, the Benjamite, and he is described as a left-handed man, which is going to be significant. I'll go ahead and read in Judges chapter 3. Judges chapter 3. It says in the middle of that, the people of Israel sent tribute by him to Eglon, by Ehud, to the king of Moab. And Ehud made for himself a sword with two edges, a cubit in length. By the way, a cubit is the distance from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger. It's about 18 inches. So, a stealthy sword, you might say. And he bound it to his right thigh under his clothes, and he presented the tribute to Eglon, the king of Moab. Now, Eglon, funnily enough, is a very fat man. And when Ehud had finished that's what the text says, presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute. But he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. as he commanded. And he commanded silence, and all his attendants went out from his presence, and Ehud came to him, and as he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he arose from his seat, and Ehud reached with his left hand, took the sword from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. And the hilt, the handle of the knife, also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade. For he did not pull the sword out of his belly, and the dung came out. So Ehud stealthily stabs Eglon and kills him, so much so that the fat covers up the sword. I mean, think about this: an 18-inch sword, and he's able to take it all.
Well, yeah, not the not the lightest man in the world here at this point. Story gets a little grotesque, but I think the powerful thing here, of course, is what is happening, as Michael's already revealed, that these people have come over to oppress Israel because of the wrongdoing of Israel at this point. God raises up Ehud, and he does this act by killing Eglon at this point. And after this, he locks the door, leaves. All the court attenders are thinking, oh, he's going to the bathroom, so we're going to wait to go in there. And then after a long time, they're like, okay, this is a bit too long for him to even go to the bathroom. They unlock the door, find their king dead, in all his state of gloriousness that probably was quite terrible to behold as they come in. And meanwhile, Ehud has gone back to the men of Israel, has rose up a fighting force, and then defeats the forces that were there in Moab to free Israel from the Moabites. And they had 80 years of comfortable rest after this because of what God did through Ehud. And now, of course, we see the powerful deliverance of the people of Israel here through Ehud because of God's faithfulness to Israel as they cried out in help for him. Michael, what else do you see that's important in this text?
Well, I think it's a good example of somebody being willing to do what was necessary in a given time. Especially think to the time that this is in. God's people are a very earthly kingdom. That's what they are. They're a physical kingdom. And so they fought physical wars against other enemies. So what God asked them to do to deliver them was very physical in nature. And so it was the assassination of a king. For us, it'd be very different today. We recognize that we do not have an earthly kingdom. Jesus said that my kingdom is not of this world. And if it were, he'd have people that would be fighting for him. So, but the point remains that we should have courage like Ehud to do what is necessary, to stand up. And maybe it might not be against people, but stand up against the schemes of the devil and to act with integrity and do the right thing.
And he definitely put himself at a great personal potential cost, because
Yes.
if anything goes wrong in this, he's dead. But
Yes. Oh, yeah.
he's able to do this and get away in this way. But he took a real risk in doing this. But it was more important for him to do the will of God than for him to feel personally safe. He put himself at great risk and harm potentially to do this. But his first priority was, of course, doing the will of God. And I think that's something that would be important as well for us to take away from the story, is the fact that, not only is God faithful and he will be with his people, but we need to look to what we can do for him in doing his will, regardless of what that really kind of means for us.
Yeah, definitely. And just thinking too, about how they were being oppressed, the people of Israel being oppressed. And
Mm-hmm.
these are not noble people that God's people are defeating. They're people that had oppressed the Israelites. And so God delivered them from those oppressors.
That's right, absolutely. And we can see God's power throughout the book of Judges, and this is just another one of those great stories and tells about it. So we're continuing on. We want to look at what we're reading this week. Michael, I think you're continuing in the tremendous book, The Case for Christ by Mr. Lee Strobel. So why don't you tell us what you've been reading about in that wonderful book?
Yeah, he's continuing to build a case for Christ, obviously, duh. But no, he's building it through different ways. And one of the things he looked at was other writings, other support, historical support for the existence of Jesus and what
Mm.
we can learn about Jesus. And I found this fascinating. Some of this I did not know. Um, but he interviewed a Dr. Edwin Yamaki, and he asked him what we would know about Jesus if we didn't have the New Testament or early Christian writings. So what will we
Mm.
know about Jesus?
That's right.
He said, we would know that first, Jesus was a Jewish teacher. Second, many people believe that he performed healings and exorcisms. Third, some people believed he was the Messiah. Fourth, he was rejected by Jewish leaders. Fifth, he was crucified under Pontius Pilate in the reign of Tiberius. Sixth, despite the shameful death, his followers who believed that he was still alive spread beyond Palestine so that there were multitudes of them in Rome by AD 64. And seventh, all kinds of people from the cities and countryside, men and women, slave and free, worshiped him as God. So that's all stuff that we just learned from history, from historic
Mm.
writings. And I think that's
Right.
fantastic. I mean, you've got every key event, or maybe not every, but you've got the majority of the key events of the gospel, that he lived, that he performed miracles to prove he was the Son of God, that his followers actually believed that he was the Son of God. That wasn't like a modern invention that people looked back and said, oh, wow, we just figured it out. He was actually the Son of God. Well, no, he claimed to be the Son of God. His
That's right.
followers believed that about him. And he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. I mean, there are people that have over time have argued that Jesus never existed. So
Mm.
historically, the fact that we can, through other writings and through archaeology, prove that he existed and prove that he was crucified under Pontius Pilate through other writings that aren't the Bible, aren't Christian writers, what you would say unbiased people, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we're able to see all of this, and people that from history claim that Christians believe he was resurrected. So even the resurrection, that's not a modern invention. It's not that people look back and said, it'd be really great to build a religion about him coming back to life. Well,
Mm.
no, they believed that from the beginning because that's really what happened. So that it's been a faith building exercise. So I would encourage you, if you've never read The Case for Christ, to look at it. The author, as I've said before, being an investigative journalist, he's thorough, and
Very.
he's addressing different objections. And so, like the chapter I'm about to read is from an objector standpoint. So, anyways, it's been a great read so far.
Well,
What
it's
about you?
fantastic. It really is fantastic. I would definitely I've allowed somebody to borrow my copy currently to have, but it's something that I've always appreciated because there is so much good stuff in that. And the fact that again, all of this information came to him while he was actively trying to disprove the
Yes.
Bible, disprove these claims about Jesus and especially the resurrection, and him being able to find the stuff in spite of that is quite impressive. And so definitely would suggest that to anybody, the movie or the book, but the book is a lot more detailed, obviously. That's always the way it works. Movies only have
Mhm.
such a short time to do things. So definitely do that. As for myself, I continue to think about discipleship as I go along. Book that I'm currently reading is Transforming Discipleship by Mr. Greg Ogden. He writes a few books about discipleship. It's something that's very important to him, and I think it should be very important to all Christians. And he was talking about discipleship, the kind of lack of discipleship that we see within much of modern day American Christianity, and the fact that there are so many people who confess a kind of born again lifestyle, that they've given their lives to Christ in this way, and yet how little influence that actually is having on the culture, and how much lament there kind of is about the fact that, man, we've got so many people who are Christians, yet they make no real impact on the culture at large.
Mm.
And he references a couple studies by both the Pew Research Group as well as the Barna Group, and the Barna Group is kind of outspokenly a Christian group at this point. And one of the people who were doing the study said these words. My research shows that most Americans who confess their sins to God and ask Christ to be their Savior live almost indistinguishably from the unrepentant sinners, and their lives bear little, if any, fruit for the kingdom of God. And
Mm.
as we talk about what this whole podcast is really about. Discipleship podcast, changing our lives to be more like Christ and away from being like the world. I think this quote is something that is very important for us to kind of think about, because are our lives very distinguishable from people who are in the world? Can people tell, not by us having to say, "Hey, I'm a Christian"?
Mm,
Can they tell by our lifestyle that we are clearly distinguishable from the world? If we can't, then we must look and say, well, am I truly living the lifestyle that a Christian should live?
mm,
Because the world is going to interact, is going to be very different from the way that a Christian should live. It should be obvious in just about everything that we do,
mm,
right? It shouldn't be hard to figure out. And if it is, then I would say we're not being light, we're not being salt, we're not being different. If it is
mm,
not indistinguishable. And by the way, this does not mean that we're constantly carrying a Bible with us, or we're carrying signs that say, ask me about Jesus or something. But it should kind of almost be an unwritten sign on our lives by the way that we interact with people, the way that we talk, the way that we dress, the way that we do just about everything should be the way that God would, or the thing that the way that would please God the most, the things that
mm.
would please God the most. And in doing so, I think we can make a much bigger impact than I think we fully understand by truly being in the image of Christ, living as a Christian lifestyle, which will be so different from the world that will cause people to say, those people are Christians
Yeah,
and they have something that I don't.
absolutely. Well, we're going camping this weekend, and we just bought a spotlight, a Ryobi battery powered spotlight. The thing has 3,000 lumens.
Yeah.
I had the lights on in the house and turned it on, and you could still see the light. It was that bright. But I took it out last night, and
Yeah.
when it's dark out, you have a light that's that powerful. I mean, it has a
Yeah.
range of like 650 yards, but we're in a dark world. Like we talk about that often, like in conversation among Christians or just in general. This world is degenerating, more morally. So if we're in a dark place, I mean, we don't have to be a huge spotlight to shine bright. But if we are, or if we are any kind of light in the midst of true darkness, like we are in, we will stand out, just like Dakota said. And so if we're not standing out, and we're not standing out quickly, well, what's there? Are we dimmer than we think we are?
Mm. Yeah. I think that's very true. I think that's something that every Christian has to look in themselves and see am I shining as a light? Am I so indistinguishable that I am making a difference, or am I just fitting in with
Mm,
the dark world that we are currently living in? And I think that's something that we need to all look at so that we can bear fruit in a dark world. And I think we can make much more of an impact than we think. I mean, genuinely, if even half of the people in this country that claim to be disciples of Christ actually live like disciples of Christ, the wave of change that could happen
oh yeah,
would be immense, beyond imagination. But that requires God's people to do this. And hopefully, this can be your call today if you feel convicted in this way, to look, to observe, to consider your life, and to think, am I shining as that light? Am I bearing fruit? Am I making a difference as a disciple of Christ?
absolutely. So we thank you for joining us today on the M&M Discipleship Podcast. Until next time, let's look for God, learn from His Word, and shine the light of Jesus wherever we go. Have a good day. God bless you guys.